After being abandoned and pregnant, she rescues a stranger. What happens next will shock you surely. Before listening to this story, please subscribe our channel for more interesting stories like this. The rain drummed softly on the roof of Precision Garage, the small, modest auto repair shop where Leah Richards, a 25-year-old woman, worked tirelessly. The rhythmic sounds of clanging tools, the hum of engines, and the smell of oil surrounded her as she leaned over an old Chevy, adjusting the timing belt with practiced precision. But today, Leah's mind wasn't fully on the task at hand. It was on the unexpected twist her life had recently taken. Mark, her boyfriend of 3 years, had left her without warning. He had accepted a high-paying job abroad and left without even consulting her. His abrupt departure had left Leah feeling both abandoned and betrayed, but there was more. A few days ago, Leah had discovered she was pregnant, and the weight of this secret was heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even her best friend and assistant mechanic, Tom Carter. Leah wasn't ready to share this news. She was still grappling with it herself, unsure of how she was going to handle the challenge of raising a child on her own. "Leah, have you seen the Phillips screwdriver?" Tom's voice broke through her thoughts. "It's in the red box by the compressor," she replied, grateful for the distraction. Tom had been her rock through all the ups and downs of running the garage. He had been there for her after her father passed away, leaving Leah to inherit and manage the shop. But even with Tom's support, Leah knew the garage was barely staying afloat. Between paying bills, handling clients, and now dealing with the unexpected news of her pregnancy, her world felt like it was spinning out of control. That night, Leah returned to her small apartment above the garage. She collapsed onto the worn couch, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. "How am I going to do this alone?" she whispered, the thought of becoming a single mother filling her with fear. The garage barely made enough to cover its expenses, and the idea of raising a baby without support terrified her. Tears welled up in Leah's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't have time to cry, not now. She had to be strong. Despite her fear, Leah made a decision that night. She would face whatever came her way. She had been through tough times before, and she had survived. Her baby deserved a mother who was strong, determined, and unafraid of the challenges ahead. What Leah didn't know was that fate had unexpected plans for her, plans that would soon change the course of her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. The next morning was overcast, the sky a dull gray, as if it, too, shared Leah's mood. She drove her old pickup truck through the winding, mist-covered roads, heading toward the garage earlier than usual. The familiar sound of the engine provided some comfort, a small moment of calm amid the chaos that had become her life. Suddenly, a flash in her rearview mirror caught Leah's attention. A sleek black sports car was speeding down the road behind her, zigzagging recklessly between lanes. Leah barely had time to move out of the way before the car raced past her, tires screeching as it skidded dangerously around a tight curve. Her heart raced as she watched the car lose control, careening off the road and smashing into the guardrail. Without a second thought, Leah pulled over and rushed toward the smoking wreck. The acrid smell of burning rubber filled the air as she approached the twisted metal. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Leah shouted as she reached the driver's side door. A low groan was her only response. Inside, a man in his early 30s lay unconscious, blood trickling down from a deep cut on his forehead. Leah acted on instinct. With all her strength, she forced the car door open and unbuckled the man's seatbelt. Just as she dragged him away from the wreck, the car burst into flames, sending a wave of heat across Leah's face. Panting, Leah lowered the man to the ground a safe distance from the wreck. His pulse was weak, but he was alive. She quickly dialed 911, her hands trembling as she gave the dispatcher the details of the crash. As she waited for the ambulance to arrive, Leah studied the unconscious man. Despite the blood and the dirt covering him, it was clear he was someone of importance. He was dressed in a sharply tailored suit, now ruined by the crash. Who was he? And why had he been driving so recklessly? The wail of sirens broke through Leah's thoughts, and soon paramedics were surrounding them. They loaded the man onto a stretcher as Leah stood back, watching. A police officer approached her, asking for her statement. Leah recounted what had happened as clearly as she could. "Do you know who the driver is?" the officer asked. Leah shook her head. "No idea. He was already unconscious when I got to him." The paramedics closed the ambulance doors, and Leah watched as the vehicle sped away, its sirens fading into the distance. She stood there for a moment longer, rain starting to fall lightly around her. She couldn't explain it, but something about this man felt important. She had a gut feeling that their paths weren't going to part so easily. With a deep breath, Leah got back into her truck, her mind racing with questions. Who was the man she had just saved? And why couldn't she shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand? Later that day, Leah found herself standing at the entrance of Riverside Memorial Hospital ***, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea why she had come. Something about the accident earlier gnawed at her, a sense of unfinished business that she couldn't shake. Inside the hospital was a flurry of activity. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of beeping monitors filled the air as Leah made her way to the information desk. "Excuse me," she said to the receptionist, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm looking for information about a man who was brought in earlier today. He was in a car accident on Highway 14. The receptionist typed something into her computer, then looked up at Leah. "Are you family?" Leah hesitated. No. I'm the one who pulled him out of the car." The receptionist's face softened. "I see. Well, I can tell you that the man you're asking about is in surgery right now. You're welcome to wait in the lobby." Leah nodded and sat down in one of the uncomfortable chairs in the waiting room, her mind racing. Why had she come here? Why was she so concerned about a stranger? Hours passed slowly as Leah alternated between worrying about the man and thinking about her own problems. Her hand rested on her stomach from time to time, a subconscious reminder of the secret she was carrying. Near noon, raised voices in the hallway caught Leah's attention. She looked up to see an older man in an expensive suit arguing with a nurse. His voice was sharp, filled with impatience and authority. "I demand to see my ward immediately," the man said. "Mr. Caldwell," the nurse replied, trying to maintain her calm. "Mr. Ethan Caldwell is still in recovery. The doctor will speak with you as soon as possible." The name caught Leah's attention. Ethan Caldwell, so that was the name of the man she had rescued. Just as the older man turned to leave, his gaze landed on Leah, narrowing with suspicion. He marched over to her, his eyes cold and calculating. "And who are you?" he asked sharply. "What are you doing here?" Leah stood up, nerves jangling. I'm Leah Richards. I'm the one who helped your nephew after the accident." The man's expression changed instantly, though Leah couldn't shake the feeling that his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, I see. I'm Henry Caldwell, Ethan's uncle. Thank you for what you did. We owe you a great debt." Something about Henry's demeanor made Leah uneasy. His words were polite, but there was an undercurrent of something darker behind them. "How is he?" Leah asked, genuinely concerned. "Stable, from what I've been told." "Thanks to you, of course," Henry replied, his smile tightening. "Tell me, did Ethan say anything to you before he lost consciousness? Did he mention where he was going or why he was driving so recklessly?" Leah frowned. "No. He was unconscious when I got to him." Before Henry could ask more questions, a doctor approached. "Mr. Caldwell, your nephew is out of surgery and stable. You can see him now, but only for a few minutes." Henry nodded and turned back to Leah. "Thank you again, Miss Richards. If you wouldn't mind leaving your details with the nurse, I'm sure Ethan will want to thank you personally once he recovers. Leah nodded, but as Henry walked away, a strange unease settled over her. Something wasn't right. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was more to this situation than met the eye. 3 days had passed since the accident, and Leah couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. She had tried to put the incident out of her mind, but the sense of unfinished business weighed heavily on her. There was something about Ethan Caldwell, about his Uncle Henry, that gnawed at her, a puzzle with pieces missing. Determined to get some answers, Leah found herself back at Riverside Memorial, sneaking down the sterile hospital corridors toward Ethan's room. It wasn't easy to get past the nurses, but she took advantage of a shift change to slip inside unnoticed. Her heart pounded as she closed the door quietly behind her. Ethan lay in the bed, his face pale and bruised, but his eyes fluttered open when he heard the door. His gaze settled on Leah, and a weak smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You must be my guardian angel," he rasped, his voice weak but warm. Leah approached cautiously. "I'm Leah. I'm the one who pulled you out of the car after the accident." Ethan nodded slowly. "My uncle told me what you did. I can never thank you enough." For a moment, Leah hesitated. She had no idea how to begin, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. "Ethan, do you remember anything about the accident? The doctors said they found something strange in your blood." Ethan's expression darkened instantly, and he glanced toward the door as if checking to make sure no one else was listening. He sat up slightly, wincing in pain as he did so. "I was drugged," he said quietly, his voice filled with bitterness. "But that crash, it wasn't an accident. Leah, my life, it's not what it seems." Leah's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Ethan exhaled slowly, looking into her eyes with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "I've been investigating my Uncle Henry for months. I believe he had something to do with my parents' deaths 10 years ago. Everyone said it was a plane crash, but I've uncovered evidence that it was sabotage." Leah felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "Your uncle? But he seems so concerned about you." "It's all an act," Ethan said bitterly. "Ever since my parents died, Henry's controlled my entire life. He's been embezzling money from the family business for years, and when I started digging into his affairs, I think he tried to have me killed." Ethan's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Leah instinctively reached out, taking his hand in hers. "This is serious, Ethan. We need to go to the police." "No," Ethan said sharply, shaking his head. "We can't. Henry has connections everywhere. If we go to the wrong people, I'm as good as dead." Leah bit her lip, unsure of what to say. Ethan's story sounded too surreal to be true, but the fear in his eyes was real. "I know this is asking a lot," Ethan continued, his voice urgent. "But there's a flash drive hidden in my apartment, behind a painting in the living room. It has all the evidence I've gathered, financial records, emails, everything. I can't get it from here. Will you help me, Leah? Can I trust you?" Leah's mind whirled. She barely knew this man, yet here he was, asking her to risk everything to help him. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew she couldn't say no. "You can trust me," she said firmly. "I'll get the flash drive." Leah arrived at Ethan's apartment later that evening, her heart pounding in her chest as she approached the sleek, high-rise building. The lobby was clean and modern, filled with marble and glass, but it felt cold and sterile. Leah gave her name to the doorman, Eddie, who nodded and let her in after she explained that she was there to pick up something for Ethan. As she rode the elevator to the 12th floor, Leah's hands trembled. This was beyond anything she had ever done before, sneaking into a stranger's apartment to recover evidence of a conspiracy. It felt like something out of a spy movie. Ethan's apartment was exactly as she had expected, sleek, minimalist, and filled with expensive-looking modern furniture. Leah quickly made her way to the living room, her eyes scanning for the painting Ethan had mentioned. It didn't take long to find it, a large abstract piece in shades of blue and gray that dominated the wall. Leah moved the painting aside with trembling hands, revealing the small safe behind it. She punched in the combination Ethan had given her, 07885, his mother's birthdate, and the safe clicked open. Inside, Leah found a small black flash drive, along with several other documents and a small jewelry box. She didn't have time to inspect the other items. She grabbed the flash drive and was about to close the safe when she heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the lock. Panic surged through her. Someone was entering the apartment. Without thinking, Leah quickly put the painting back in place and darted into the bedroom, hiding in the closet and leaving the door slightly ajar. From her hiding place, Leah listened as footsteps echoed through the apartment. Her heart pounded in her chest as she recognized one of the voices. It was Henry. "Search everything," Henry barked, his voice sharp with anger. "That flash drive has to be here." "Are you sure your nephew didn't take it with him?" another voice asked, one of Henry's men, no doubt. "Impossible," Henry replied. "We searched him at the hospital. Besides, I've been keeping tabs on his visitors. No one has been near him except," his voice trailed off, and Leah held her breath. "That mechanic," Henry growled. "She was in his room earlier today." Leah's blood ran cold. "Do you want us to go after her?" the man asked. "Not yet," Henry said after a long pause. "First, finish searching this place. If we don't find it, then we'll deal with her." The minutes that followed felt like hours. Leah could hear them rummaging through the apartment, opening drawers, overturning furniture. Every time the footsteps drew near the bedroom closet, she felt her heart stop. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Henry spoke again. "It's not here. Let's go. We need to move quickly." Leah listened as they exited the apartment. Only when she was certain they were gone did she dare to breathe again. She waited a few more moments before slowly slipping out of the closet, her legs shaking with fear. She had barely escaped, but she had the flash drive. Leah left the apartment as quickly as she could, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. By the time she reached her truck, her hands were slick with sweat, her pulse racing. She knew she was in serious danger now. Henry knew who she was, and he wouldn't stop until he found her. With the flash drive securely in her pocket, Leah drove away from the city, her mind racing. She couldn't go home, it would be the first place Henry's men would look for her. Instead, she headed toward an old garage on the outskirts of town, a place that had once belonged to her father and was now long forgotten. It would serve as her hideout while she figured out her next move. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a very dangerous turn. Leah parked her truck behind the old garage, making sure it was hidden from view of the main road. The garage had been abandoned for years, but it was the perfect place to hide out for the time being. No one knew it existed except her, and that gave her a small measure of comfort. As she entered the dusty garage, Leah switched on her phone's flashlight, illuminating the forgotten tools and car parts that littered the floor. The space smelled of rust and oil, but it felt strangely comforting, a reminder of simpler times when her biggest worry had been fixing a broken engine. Leah sat down on an old couch that had been left in the corner, her hands shaking as she pulled out the flash drive. With trembling fingers, she plugged it into her laptop, praying that it held the answers Ethan had promised. The screen flickered to life, revealing a series of files, financial documents, encrypted emails, and, most shocking of all, a video file. Leah's heart pounded as she clicked on the video. The grainy footage showed Henry Caldwell sitting in what appeared to be his office, talking to a man whose face was obscured by shadows. The audio was muffled, but Leah could make out enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "The Davidson plane, no mechanical failures," Henry said, his voice calm but cold. "It will look like an accident." Leah's blood ran cold as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. This was it, the irrefutable proof of Henry's involvement in the sabotage that had killed Ethan's parents. But how had Ethan obtained this recording? And how long had Henry been covering his tracks? Leah scrolled through the other files on the flash drive, her heart racing as she uncovered more evidence of Henry's crimes, embezzlement, fraudulent business deals, and a trail of bribes to various officials. It was worse than she had imagined. As she sat back, trying to process everything she had uncovered, a noise outside the garage made her freeze. Her heart leapt into her throat. Had Henry found her? She quickly turned off the laptop and crept toward the dirty window. Peering through the cracked glass, Leah saw a patrol car had pulled up on the road nearby. 2 officers got out of the car, their flashlights scanning the surrounding area. Leah's mind raced. She didn't know if the police were looking for her specifically or if they were just doing a routine patrol, but she couldn't take any chances. If they found her, there was no telling whose side they were on. Acting on instinct, Leah remembered something her father had once shown her. Years ago, during Prohibition, the garage had been used as a smuggling hub. There was a hidden tunnel that connected the garage to an old warehouse nearby. It was narrow and dark, but it was her only option. Moving quickly, Leah pushed aside a heavy shelf, revealing the entrance to the tunnel. She grabbed her laptop and the flash drive, taking one last glance at the main door, where the flashlights were starting to filter through the cracks. With her heart pounding, Leah ducked into the tunnel, her phone's flashlight barely illuminating the way. The air was musty, the passage claustrophobic, but she forced herself to keep moving. Every step felt like an eternity as she crawled through the darkness, her fear growing with each passing second. Finally, after what felt like hours, Leah saw a faint glow ahead. She emerged into an old warehouse, the smell of dust and decay filling the air. Through a dirty window, she could see the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Leah collapsed onto a box, allowing herself a brief moment of weakness. Tears welled up in her eyes as the enormity of the situation crashed over her. She was alone, pregnant, and being hunted by a powerful man who would stop at nothing to protect his secrets. For the first time in days, Leah allowed herself to cry. She cried for Ethan, for the injustice he had suffered, for the baby growing inside her, and for the life she had lost in the blink of an eye. But Leah wasn't one to give up easily. Wiping her tears away, she pulled out her phone and dialed the only number she could trust, Tom's. "Leah?" Tom's sleepy voice answered after a few rings. "Do you know what time it is?" "Tom, listen to me," Leah said, her voice trembling. "I'm in trouble. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of Tom waking up. "What's going on? Where are you?" "I can't explain everything right now," Leah said, her words rushing out in a panic. "I just need you to go to Riverside Memorial and make sure Ethan Caldwell is safe. Don't talk to anyone but him. Tell him I have what he asked for, and that I'm safe. Then I need you to find a place where we can meet. Somewhere safe." "Leah, you're scaring me," Tom said, his voice tense. "What have you gotten yourself into?" "I'll explain everything later," Leah promised. "But right now, I need you to trust me. Please, Tom. You're the only person I can trust." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Leah feared he would say no. But then Tom sighed. "All right. I'll go check on him. Just, be careful." Leah hung up the phone and let out a shaky breath, trying to calm the storm of emotion swirling inside her. Dawn was breaking, and with it came a renewed sense of determination. She had no choice but to keep going, no matter how dangerous the road ahead might be. She had to fight, for Ethan, for her baby, and for the truth. The afternoon sun was low in the sky as Leah made her way to Eastwood Park, her heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. She had received a message from Henry, demanding a meeting. He knew she had the flash drive, and if she didn't hand it over, he had promised to make sure both she and Ethan suffered the consequences. Leah knew it was a trap, but she couldn't avoid it. This had to end, one way or another. She sat on a park bench, her hands trembling as she waited. She wasn't alone. Tom and Ethan were nearby, hidden and ready to act if things went south. Leah had called in a favor from her cousin, a prosecutor in the anti-corruption unit. He had agreed to help, but they had to be careful. Henry had connections everywhere, and if they weren't careful, this could all blow up in their faces. Leah scanned the park, her eyes darting nervously between the trees. The park was nearly deserted, the quiet eerie in its stillness. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man in an expensive suit, his face twisted with anger and determination. Henry Caldwell approached, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Leah sitting on the bench. His expression was cold, his smile tight and filled with malice. "Miss Richards," Henry said, his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt. "I'm glad you decided to be reasonable." Leah stood, her heart racing. "It's over, Henry. I have the flash drive. I have all the evidence, the murders, the fraud, everything." Henry chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "And you think that matters?" "I'm a powerful man, Leah. I can make you, Ethan, and that evidence disappear without a trace." "Maybe," Leah replied, her voice shaking slightly. "But not before this." With a trembling hand, she pulled out her phone and pressed play on the recording she had made at the hospital, the one where Henry had unknowingly confessed to his crimes. Henry's face paled as his own voice echoed through the park, admitting to the sabotage that had killed Ethan's parents. His eyes flashed with rage, and he took a threatening step toward Leah. "Give me that phone," he growled, his voice filled with menace. At that moment, Tom, Ethan, and Leah's cousin emerged from the shadows, followed by several police officers. They surrounded Henry, cutting off any chance of escape. "Henry Caldwell," Leah's cousin said, stepping forward and flashing his badge. "You're under arrest for the murders of Robert and Emily Caldwell, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Henry's eyes darted wildly between Leah and the officers, his face contorted with fury. "This isn't over," he spat. "You think you've won, but this is far from over." "It's over, Uncle," Ethan said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, but filled with a quiet determination. "The truth is finally out." Henry glared at him, his expression a mixture of hatred and something else, something almost like respect. "It seems I underestimated you, Ethan. I underestimated all of you." As the officers handcuffed Henry and led him away, Leah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Relief flooded through her, but so did exhaustion. The adrenaline that had been keeping her going was fading, leaving her feeling weak and shaky. Ethan walked over to her, his eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you, Leah. For everything." Tom joined them, pulling Leah into a tight hug. For a moment, the three of them stood there, united by the ordeal they had just survived. But Leah knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in the park, and Leah's life had taken a dramatic turn. Precision Garage, the small shop she had inherited from her father, was no longer struggling. Thanks to the funds recovered from Henry's embezzlement, Leah had transformed the business into a thriving car restoration shop. Ethan had been a constant presence in her life, and together they had built something neither of them could have imagined. Ethan had also launched the Caldwell Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping orphaned children, a tribute to the parents he had lost. It was his way of turning the pain of his past into hope for the future, and Leah couldn't have been more proud of him. As she worked on the engine of an old Mustang, Leah felt a strong kick in her very swollen belly. She smiled and placed a hand on her bump. "Easy there, little one," she murmured, her heart filled with warmth. "You'll be here soon enough." She wiped her hands on a rag and turned as Ethan walked into the garage, a radiant smile on his face. "How's my favorite mechanic?" he asked, leaning in to kiss her on the cheek. Leah grinned. "Busy, as usual." Ethan knelt in front of her, placing his hand on her belly. "Hey, champ, give your mom a break, okay? You'll have plenty of time to cause trouble when you're out here." Leah laughed softly as the baby gave another small kick, as if in response. She and Ethan shared a look of love and wonder, amazed at how much their lives had changed. "How was the meeting?" Leah asked as Ethan stood up. "Better than we expected," Ethan replied, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. "The foundation is ready to launch. We're going to be able to help so many kids, Leah. Give them the chance I never had." Leah's heart swelled with pride. "Your parents would be so proud of you." Ethan pulled her into a tight hug, his voice filled with emotion. "None of this would have been possible without you, Leah. You saved me in more ways than I can ever explain." The moment was interrupted by Tom, who entered the garage with a wide grin. "Hey, lovebirds, I hate to interrupt, but we've got a surprise for you." Leah and Ethan exchanged curious glances, before following Tom to the backyard of the garage. There, the entire team of mechanics stood gathered around something covered with a tarp. "What's this?" Leah asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Tom smiled widely. "We know you've been working hard, even with the baby on the way, so we decided to give you a little gift." With a flourish, Tom pulled off the tarp, revealing a beautifully customized baby stroller. It was painted a bright metallic blue with chrome details, the words "The Little Mechanic *** engraved on the front. Leah's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, guys, it's beautiful." Ethan ran his hand over the smooth surface of the stroller, his expression filled with awe. "This is incredible. Thank you." As the team surrounded them with congratulations, Leah couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed in just a year. She had gone from being a struggling mechanic, uncertain about her future, to having a thriving business, a growing family, and a sense of purpose she had never imagined. That night, after closing the garage, Leah and Ethan took a walk through Eastwood Park, the place where their journey had reached its turning point. They strolled hand in hand, their hearts filled with hope for the future. "Can you believe how much has changed?" Leah asked, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan smiled down at her, his eyes filled with love. "Sometimes I can't believe it's real." They stopped in front of the fountain, the water shimmering under the moonlight. Ethan took both of Leah's hands in his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "Leah Richards, you saved me. You gave me hope, love, and a future I never thought possible. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Leah's breath caught in her throat as tears filled her eyes. She nodded, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." As Ethan slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, Leah felt a peace she had never known. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick softly in celebration. Their journey had been long and difficult, but Leah knew that the future was bright, filled with love, family, and endless possibilities. And as they walked home together under the stars, Leah smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of their new adventure.